We are living in a world where disenfranchised kids aren't getting an education they deserve. They don't have that opportunity where it's based on something they can't control because they were born in a certain amount of richness. But based on how much income they've had when they were born with, they can't have enough money to go to college, and that's something the government has failed in doing. For example, someone who is above average in intelligence and middle class versus the poor. The middle class has that chance of making it into higher education because they have the funding to do so without a scholarship. But the poor, on the other hand, they're never making it unless they've had that miracle shot of getting a scholarship. They don't have the funding, they don't have the money to ever making it into college. And precisely because of that, SAI government stands for the fact that as the government, we would mandate universities and school scholarships to not be granted based on tests or how qualified you are. It should be based on only financial necessity. For example, if someone who is poor wants to apply, then they've been accepted, then the university has an obligation to actually give them that scholarship and funding to go to the university. Thirdly, we believe that an education isn't based on making sure the right people gets the best form of education for them. We don't have that privilege. We have to make sure everyone in the beginning has that opportunity to get any form of higher education that they want to begin with. Our goals in this debate being that we want equal education access for everyone, leading to a better life of the poor, especially the poor, and the nation at the end of the day. But at the very least, we give the poor a better foundation for them to at least survive in an era of globalization. We characterize the poor as part of society with little to none disposable income, living day to day with paychecks. They're most likely living in rural, harder to reach areas. And this debate should hinge on two main questions. Where first of all, in what principal analysis is it justified for us to completely shift the system, not denying scholarships for future people who work hard for it in case of people who never had that opportunity to begin with? But secondly, the value judgment in this debate. Which side can protect the most vulnerable, the poor, especially when their peril is our fault to begin with as the government, which I will delve more into. Our model being that we would mandate universities to give scholarships only based on financial necessity. If they deny, it would be fine, and we would reallocate resources for the poor. And thirdly, we would give government outreach programs for the disenfranchised and for better higher education. Before I move on to my principal substantive, we have to understand, why isn't this discriminative? We're giving two reasons. Where first of all, we aren't taking away someone's rights. We are giving the privilege of funding. We are giving the privilege of scholarships and power for equal competition to begin with. That the poor has been set under a lower standard, and we have to push them for equal competition. That's exactly what we are doing. We aren't taking away the rights of the people under the rest of the college. We're just giving them the poor the privilege of scholarships. But secondly, the rest of society can still be accepted to colleges without discrimination, just based on their qualifications in the first place, right? So we aren't actually being discriminative. Now, moving on to my principal substantive, we have to understand, why do scholarships exist? A side opposition may mention to appreciate the smart, but that's not significant enough to solve problems. There are no inherent practical benefits that for the smart to do. The smart will always get an education that appreciate him, as college also comes in other ways, by giving them more resources, by giving them the proper schooling and teaching they need. It's not just about giving them money. But what does money actually help? It's to help the poor. That's the why scholarships exist, for those who would never have had the opportunity to begin with. And that's the most significant reason for this motion, that we have to help the poor, that scholarships exist to help the poor, make sure those who never had an opportunity for education, for them to get it, that we may never know what would happen to them unless we have scholarships. Then, why then has the poor can't gain access to the scholarships now? What disadvantages do the poor have in gaining scholarships that they have failed, and it doesn't benefit them at all now? You understand three main reasons here. Where first of all, the poor don't have enough money. They don't have the money for lessons, for extra study lessons, for extra utensils, books, and things needed for proper education, for effective education. They can't afford that. They can't afford 24/7 extra lessons. They can't afford things for them to be successful, to go into math competitions, to get qualifications that achieve scholarships. But secondly, they don't have enough time. They don't have enough resources in areas. You have to understand that the poor usually works jobs. They have to usually help their parents. They usually do these things, and studying takes time. Gaining qualifications, gaining prestigious accolades takes time and effort. And precisely because they live in hard-to-reach rural areas, this infrastructures governments build, the education centers, those things don't affect them. It's at the very least, it's hard for them to reach it because they live far away. But lastly, and perhaps the most impactful, is that psychological factor. That precisely the fact that government has failed them, that there has been no perspective for them at all. They've been continuously told that you will never make it to college, that you should just do this minimum wage job, help me become a farmer, because it's much safer, and that hurts their efforts. That when you're told that what you are doing will never, from any form of effect, will never be any use to you, then you stop trying, and effort is what is needed for scholarships, and it's not gained, especially by the poor. But secondly, then, why is this in line with government's duties, and why do we have that power as the government to do this massive change? You have to understand the principle of reparation, where the poor's failure to get a scholarship is due to government failure. We have failed to give them proper welfare, education programs for them to succeed. And reparation is not just about what government wants, but middle and high class also want to see success. They want to see, they have that empathy, they have that eagerness for their fellow nation, their fellow citizens to be successful. And precisely because of that leads me to my next argument, where governments have an interest and a duty and an obligation in protecting the poor and society's in protecting the poor to begin with, which leads to society trust, which is what they truly want. Why is that? Because government has a main duty of actually protecting society. But thirdly, then, why do we have this power, right? You have to understand the government is built on a social contract where the citizens give us something and we give them something back. When the poor especially give them the taxes, their hard-earned money, when the people give us this power to do so, we have to fulfill our end of the contract, and that's exactly what we are doing. We are using our power to change the system for their benefit. We have the power because we are helping the poor who has given us useful things, and that's exactly what we are doing. That's why we have the power to do so. Then, thirdly, what is the exclusivity of college? And we have to extend this beyond high school, right? And which is in line with our goal of equal educational success. Why so? First of all, high school, when we give them high school, it's a setup for college. It's a setup for college. Thus, we have the duty to prolong and fully finish these educations that we have given to them for free. That's exactly our goal as a government. But secondly, you have to understand we want them to survive. They have to gain good jobs, and it's not possible in the status quo without higher education in college. They can't ever achieve that, and that's exactly why we need them to actually go to college, get that degree, etc. But fourth, why will it be better even if it's a bit discriminative? You understand, at the very least, these people will still have the equal opportunity to go into colleges. They have the resources. We are protecting the most vulnerable, the poor. That's exactly what we're doing. But under the comparative side up is discriminative towards the most vulnerable. At least ours is to those who can have an honest chance at the beginning. But but under their side, the very best case, they're still oppressing the poor, and that's what they're doing. Now, moving on to practicality, what is the short term and how will this work, right? And how will this actually give survivability? That's a priority. You have to understand there's two types of scholarships: life scholarships and education scholarships. And life scholarships, they can be for survivability, and we give them this money straight away. It's for survivability, especially in the pandemic where they need funding, etc. That's how we prioritize their survivability. But in terms of education scholarships, we give them this thing. They won't have to pay money for education that gives them more disposable income, which helps them at the end of the day. But long term, why then do the poor give the most form of success? You have to understand the poor are people who has never seen success in their entire life. They've never been seen this light in their life. But when we give them this miracle, this privilege, they'll understand it. They will never take university for granted. They will work hard, and this tough character will also lead to an next extension, being that they're more perspective in employment, meaning much more success in their life after college. But even if mentioned status quo is more progressive right now, what do we say to that? First of all, now is the perfect time for reparation. They have suffered long enough, and that's exactly what we're. But secondly, not enough. There's still massive inequality. That's not good enough for them. But under their side, their best case, the poor will still be stuck, not heard by the government, and oppressed in the process. Side government will be the only side to properly protect the poor, fulfill our end as the government I am so proud to propose.